everybody, and welcome to the Trade, Commerce, and Tourism Committee. It's Wednesday, February 18th, and I'm Councilwoman Janice Hahn, chairing this committee, waiting for the arrival any moment of Councilmember Bill Rosendahl and Tom LaBonge. There's Tom LaBonge. Please welcome Tom LaBonge.
Everybody who's clapping and gets approval on consent, anybody who didn't? No way. I'm glad I
clapped. Bill is a couple minutes out, so I thought what I would do, since they're all airport issues today, and I know that he would be interested in those.
Right.
We're going to take public comment first. So I have Arnold Sachs and Chuck Tinnen. Oh, there he is, Councilmember Bill Rosendahl.
Right.
But why don't we go ahead with the public comment? Arnold Sachs, is he here? Okay, and Chuck Tinnen.
Good job.
Oh,
Hi.
they're laying.
They're laying eggs now,
Thank you, Bill.
just like they used to.
I think I would like to hear about that.
Hey, Chad, where's my coffee?
Okay, let's go. What are we waiting for?
Brother, first, he called you first.
Let's go.
Only 15 minutes late, we're rushing. Thank you, good morning. Public comment. Since this is the last meeting before the upcoming elections, and part of the Measure B in this newspaper article stated that, we have all these airport officials here. This article regarding the solar panel Measure B said 4,000 acres of airport property would be used by the DWP for panels proposed in Measure B. Since part of Measure B also states that DWP would own the panels and the electricity, I'm wondering when that item would be discussed either in committee regarding the 4,000 acres that the LAWA, because it's airport property, will be donating to DWP, what the arrangement is, and it's never been appearing before,
I'm not supposed to really answer.
it's never appeared before the Airport Commission. And they also have one meeting on Monday, March 1st, and that's just the day before the elections, or March 2nd, whichever it is. Also, just thought I'd bring it up. This article from last month, no, actually, this month, 2/26, regarding the cargo scanners at the Port of LA. Now, it was mentioned, and I missed a few meetings, and it might have been discussed, that $90 million was budgeted for cargo scanners. But according to this article, it's a $2.4 million contract. So let's do the math. $90 million minus $2.4 million leaves like $87 million.
Not the same one.
See, whatever it is, it is. If it's a different cargo scanner, it's using it for containers. Why, A, $2.4 million, and we were told that the $90 million wasn't going to be spent, and B, why a Chinese company? There was a lot of screaming and yelling when there was the the Eastern,
Thank you very much.
Arabian companies were chosen to run the ports. There was a contract put out by the government for running the ports, and it was outrage. And yet we're going with Chinese companies to do scanning work in America.
Thank you
Why
very
is
much.
nobody mentioning anything about that? Sure would like an answer on the 4,000-acre property. No.
That's not going to happen. It's always, that airport property is always going to remain airport property, period. But what may happen if it does pass, that any space available that doesn't conflict with the mission of what the Parks Department is, what the Convention Center is, what the harbor, what the airport is, DWP is going to explore solar panels everywhere.
Thank you, Mr.
Thank you.
Yes, Chuck Tinnen.
Good morning, committee members.
Good morning.
Chuck Tinnen. Our state of affairs is sad. Our state treats people like toys, and the budget crisis is a game of money. Who gets what and why? We didn't cause it, and they should do something. I wonder when it's all sorted out how much the state's going to fund our city for much-needed housing crisis, foreclosures, and loss of affordable housing. So far, because the state has no plan and no money, gosh, you wonder. It reminds me of a realistic computer game called Sim City that takes an expert to play it. It starts by developing and building a city from nothing from the land. Build it, develop it, good decisions, run it, manage it, make it grow. And if you're not careful, you have a financial runaway, the people will scream at you, and you'll lose it all. It deals with a financial balance, which is the key to healthy existence and growth of a city that this state desperately needs. Some kind of solution to put us back on track, and I mean now or we'll sink. Noah had the right idea when he saw a disaster coming: pack up and sail away to a safer environment to avoid drowning. Look at history, failing empires and changes. Don't allow what's happening to our state to happen to our city and then blame them. We need trade, commerce, and tourism to exist, and we need to find ways to overcome the crisis and not allow it to swallow us up. Compromise is a good start, unity and collectiveness and a plan. You give to get and not take. Another thing coming up, the Marine Life Protection Act. Governor Arnold put a freeze on it, closing down 1,100 miles of coastline. Private funding is bailing the state. Private funding, not the state. There's going to be a loss of $100 million in local economy. Watch out, San Pedro and the port. You're going to be hit real hard. And stop the violence. We can all live in peace. Thank you.
Thank you very much. You can only imagine the environmental impact report needed to build an ark filled with 2 species of every animal.
But he got
Can you imagine getting that
Noah
approved?
got an expediter.
Yeah.
He got an expediter.
Yeah, can you imagine the neighborhood council taking on that approval process?
But it was raining.
Wow. I know. Would never be done probably today. All right, let's go to item number 1.
Under item 1, the Board of Airport Commissioners submits for council approval Board Resolution number 23707, approving the proposed Crossfield Taxiway project at LAX, including council affirmation of the board certification of the final environmental impact report, adoption of the statement of overriding considerations, adoption of the CEQA findings, adoption of the project's mitigation monitoring and reporting program, adoption of the executive director's report and recommendation, and approval of her determination of LAX plan compliance, as well as approval of the project itself. That's a very quick summary, and the airport experts are here to explain to you in specific detail the actions that the board is asking the council to take.
Thank you. Good morning.
The experts weren't available, so they asked me to come. So, good morning.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Identify yourself for the record.
Roger Johnson, Deputy Executive Director, Los Angeles World Airports. If I could summarize.
Explain the
I'm sorry.
project to
Okay.
us.
The project is, it's called the Crossfield Taxiway Project. It is a taxiway that will literally bisect the airport, running north and south, connecting the north airfield and the south airfield, with the first taxiway that is designed to accommodate the new Group 6 design aircraft, which is the Airbus A380 and the Boeing 747-800. So it will allow relatively unrestricted flow on the airfield between the north and south airfield, improving taxi times, reducing taxi times, improving airfield congestion on the airport. So it's a measure that will actually operationally reduce emissions substantially on the airport. So
Because why?
because of reduced taxi times, because of reduced idle times. So the aircraft will actually be under power less than they currently are.
Because what happens now?
What happens now is when the aircraft land, and especially the A380, the aircraft has to be escorted on most of the taxiways that are Group 5 designed to make sure that other aircraft stay out of what's called the object-free area for the aircraft. And what happens then is aircraft have to stop. We end up with extensive queues where aircraft are literally parked on the ground with their engines running, which creates more emissions. So this will allow more unrestricted travel time. It's not going to fix everything, but it's the first of one of many fixes that we're working on. So,
Why did you choose this alternative? Can you explain that?
You mean as far as where the taxiway is
Yeah.
itself? This was actually part of the comprehensive master plan. This taxiway will eventually be on the western side of when we do build out all of the terminal buildings. It will be on the west side of the Midfield Satellite Concourse. So it was, the Midfield Satellite, what we're working on right now, and we'll be talking about that in a few minutes, the Tom Bradley, what we're calling now the Tom Bradley West Project, which are the west gates and the improvements to the core. We will be building a new taxiway there as part of the Tom Bradley project, but before that project, as an independent project, the Crossfield Taxiway needs to be built to improve flow of the aircraft. So the selection of the location is based on the planning process that was done in identifying long-term what facilities the airport would need to accommodate the new large aircraft, both terminal and airside.
What do we need to know about this in terms of the final EIR and overriding considerations? And
All right. As was discussed, what we're coming to you today, this project is dissimilar to many projects that come your way in that because it is a master plan project, under the terms of the LAX plan and the LAX specific plan, the executive director is required to make two findings. She must make a finding, first of all, that the project complies with the LAX plan and the applicable provisions of the specific plan. The executive director then must make a finding that the environmental document complies with CEQA. At that point, it goes to the board, and the board either approves it with modifications, or denies it. But if they approve it, then they send it to you for you to make the same findings that the executive director made. Now, the environmental document that was done on this has determined that there are a few significant impacts that are unavoidable and cannot be mitigated. So one of the things that our board had to do was adopted a statement of overriding consideration. And the significant impacts that could not be mitigated were air quality impacts that are related to construction air quality. So we have mitigated construction air quality to the extent feasible. And if you'd like, we can get, I've got...
what's the biggest source of the construction?
The biggest source of the construction emissions are the equipment. I mean, this is large equipment. It's scrapers, it's dozers, it's, these are this big yellow iron. And the emissions from that equipment are the largest single source of the construction-related emissions. Now, we have, as
How
part
long will the construction take?
Construction is approximately 14 months. About 12 of that is fairly heavy construction. Now, we have an air quality mitigation plan that was adopted as part of the master plan. It's been written into the master plan mitigation reporting program, also within the community benefits agreement. Our air quality construction program has actually been touted by both CARB and the AQMD as the model for the state on how to do construction projects. In fact, when CARB wrote its rule for off-road equipment, they modeled a lot of that after the LAWA program. We have a program where
Which is why we had this discussion together, which is even harder for me to accept, and I know Bill's probably going to have some of the same issues for his community, but if this is such a model, why do we still have construction equipment that gives off enough emissions that we can't mitigate it during construction? I think that's hard for me to grasp, that we would be touting this as a model.
There's two problems there. Number one is we do not yet have zero emission construction equipment. Because of the size of this equipment, we are still using primarily diesel equipment. Now, one of the things that we do is we require every piece of equipment that comes on the airport to be inspected. We have an independent third-party monitor that we pay for that actually reports to the LAX Coalition for Economic, Environmental, and Educational Justice. They monitor every piece of equipment that comes on the airport. If there is an air quality control device that can be used on that vehicle, the vehicle is required to have that equipment on board, and with no exceptions. There is one minor exception. If they're coming on for one day or a limited amount of time, they can come on, but then they have to leave. But even those devices, while they're great at removing things such as particulate matter, when you get into things like nitrogen oxide or NOx emissions and those emissions, you can't just filter those out. That's a chemical process. It requires some sort of catalytic converter, and at best you're getting 85 to 95% reduction of those contaminants, which is a phenomenal amount of reduction, but it's still not a zero-emission vehicle. And because of the construction time frame, because of the size of the vehicles, and the second issue is the assimilative capacity of the LA air basin is just not there. We have so little room in our air basin to add new contaminants that when we do the modeling shows that we exceed for certain periods of time the significant thresholds adopted by the AQMD.
Right. Well, and something I said yesterday, I mean, it seems to me this is a great niche industry with the Obama administration's emphasis on green technology in terms of part of the stimulus package. It's amazing to me that we still haven't come up with an industry that can manufacture, zero emissions construction equipment.
We are making tremendous strides. When we did the South
Maybe
Airfield,
maybe we will someday.
And actually, I mean, I hate, and again, because we're significant, when we first started the South Airfield project, only about 20% of the equipment that was used on that project had emission control devices that were approved. If that project were to go forward today with the same equipment, 100% of those pieces of equipment now have approved emission control devices. So we've actually made some tremendous strides in that area.
So how many of the large aircraft will be landing and taking off during construction?
During construction, right now we have.
How does that work?
Well, they will be using, right now during construction, they will be using the taxiways that they're using today. They'll be using either taxiway Sierra or Quebec, which are the two that are on the immediate west side of Tom Bradley Terminal, or they will be using taxiway Alpha
This
Alpha.
won't affect that at all.
No, it will not.
And then obviously everybody wants to know if we're going to be able to capture some of the stimulus package funding for these kinds of projects to, upgrade and modernize LAX.
We hope so. We are working very closely with the FAA. As you know, Gina Marie Lindsay was back in Washington, D.C. a week ago. I have been meeting with the FAA's Airport District Office. We actually have changed some of our contract provisions so that they comply with what we would need to get ALP funding. What's
the total cost for this project?
The construction cost for the taxiway is $81.9 million. The total program cost is about $120 million. And I think, as I shared with you, the engineer's estimate for the construction was $116 million. The low bid came in at $81.9. So it is a good time to be building, if there's any bright side to the economy. As you know, we're doing this under a PLA, and the President has signed an executive order repealing the ban on federal funding for construction projects done under a PLA. That was the last thing that would have prevented us, we believe, from receiving federal funding. So we're actually delaying the construction start for a few weeks in hopes that we may get some stimulus money for this.
So what we need to do today, again, is agree with the executive director's findings that this was a green-lighted project that fits within the specific plan of the LAX master plan, and also agree to accept these overriding
Correct.
conditions.
Agree that the environmental analysis was done in compliance with CEQA. The project complies with the LAX plan and the applicable provisions of the specific plan.
Yeah, and the tough one is that there's nothing we can do, but the fact of the matter is we're going to increase emissions during the construction period. But ultimately, when the project is completed, it will make the airport, according to you, more safe, more efficient, and ultimately will reduce emissions from idling planes.
Yeah, if you were to do an emissions balance in the same way you do an economic analysis where you looked at your capital costs
right.
and then to see what your internal rate of return would be,
Right.
the IRR on the emissions
Right.
is pretty spectacular.
Right.
So the net result will eventually be a reduction in emissions, but it comes with a high capital cost
Right.
of emissions during
Well, one of the things that the airport might do, similar to what the port has done, the port has actually partnered with a company that was looking to help manufacture a heavy-duty electric truck.
Right.
And that first truck is actually rolling off the assembly line. We're going to have a big
Unveiling.
Thank you. Unveiling of this electric truck might be something the airport would consider doing, is partnering with a manufacturer who, and by providing incentives, may be able to manufacture the first heavy-duty, zero-emission dozer. Think about it.
We will. Yes.
Yeah, I think you're the entity to do that, like the port was the entity to partner with an electric truck manufacturer.
Right.
And that manufacturer is actually located in my council district, so it's, providing jobs. It's also providing the next generation of jobs, teaching young men and women how to, maintain electric engines. That's, a career in itself. So anyway, it's something to look at.
Okay.
I know, Councilman.
Fun. You really covered it all. It's not much for the kid here. Really, there isn't. Two things, though. You said 12 to 14 months.
That's correct.
You figure it'll be done then in 14 months?
Yes.
When you say that?
Yes.
Okay. Secondly, I'm hearing, tell me if you're hearing a bit of disappointment about the A380. First of all, the number of passengers is similar to a 747-400. They haven't really made it a significant savings there, and they're 2 a day, which at the moment kind of shut down all operations as they come in and out. Is that how it works?
To your point on the number of seats, Qantas right now is the only airline that's flying regularly scheduled A380s in, and they only have 450 seats on the aircraft. So I guess the good news, if you're flying Qantas, it's a very comfortable flight, but they are not bringing more passengers in. We are shutting down the airport. That we do have to shut down the area around the plane as the plane's moving. I mean, it does require some operational workarounds because the airfield's not designed for a Group 6 airplane.
Yeah.
So.
When you do the construction, day, night, round the clock, what's the time?
We are assuming right now, no, that we will not be working 24/7. I believe we assumed about a 10-hour shift, and I'll ask Tony. What are we working? What were the shifts? I'm sorry, Tony Skidmore is with the environmental firm that did the environmental analysis for the CEQA document.
Morning, Madam Chair, members of the City Council. We assume for the EIR purposes a worst-case scenario of 2 10-hour shifts. In reality, it'll be less than that, but we wanted to identify the peak emissions, make sure we didn't miss anything. But I don't think they're planning on working those kind of shifts throughout. There's going to be some peak periods, 2 10-hour shifts, but the majority will be 1 10-hour shift.
Okay, and that's during the day?
Yes, sir.
Okay. My constituents, and Ms. Hahn done a brilliant job, and have expressed concern how we will handle the emissions during construction. Have we looked at toxic fugitive dust?
Yes, sir, we have. And again, Tony, I'll ask you to elaborate on that.
The EIR includes a health risk assessment that looked at a number of contaminants. The number one thing that we look at is the particulate matter out of diesel trucks.
Sure.
That's carcinogenic.
Yeah.
But it also included dust profiles of the soils. We looked at dust from grading and as well as dust off the trucks. The California Air Resources Board has, actually, they're called speciation profiles, where they take typical soil and break it down to all the different components. So we took the 17 different metals that are within the soils, from ammonium ion to arsenic, zinc, all those. And those actually went into the health risk assessment that was modeled on a worst-case scenario of the nearest, what we call the fence line, the nearest possible area that people could be over a 70-year lifespan. So we did account for carcinogenic and acute hazards in the soils, and we modeled that, and our results found that the impacts would be well below the threshold of significance for cancer risk, acute risk, and chronic long-term risk.
And there's no technology that can somehow dampen down the...
Well, actually, let me answer that, because the findings of no significant health risks or no unacceptable risks were actually done before mitigation. With the mitigation measures, we're actually reducing, with the control measures for dust control in place, we're actually reducing the dust emissions by over 85%. So the findings were done worst case with no control measures. With the control measures, even though there were no unavoidable impacts, with the control measures that we've written in place, we'll reduce what was there by another 85%. So there's significant control measures.
And the $120 million roughly eventually will be passed on as a finished project to the airlines.
That's correct. This will go into the bulk of the costs go into the airfield cost center, where it will go into the landing fees.
Great, thank you.
Just
Mr. Lund.
looking at some, call Caterpillar. You know, they just laid off a bunch of people. Just see if they're doing any thinking. Have you ever called Caterpillar?
I have spoken with him, yes.
Yeah. Have they told you anything about these new technologies that look on? It takes a lot of power to move
Right.
A lot of
dirt, but
It does.
Right.
tell me, have you investigated that all? Because Ms. Hahn was quite articulate, eloquent, said Mr. Rosendahl, and I share that too, in the sense that we got to look at something new, and that was an opportunity.
Right.
So if you call them, maybe there's somebody who would say, look, if we look at it, you can find maybe some grant in the stimulus package that would help. I know the project's got to go ahead, safety first. That's the number one thing about anybody's movement in this city under our jurisdiction, but as we move forward, those who work in the area, we have to be concerned as well.
Right.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Oh, last thing too, what are you using reclaimed water out of Hyperion on this project?
Absolutely. For dust
100%?
control, yes, we're using
100%.
100% reclaimed water.
Very good, thank you.
Yes, sir.
Good question. Okay, let's take a couple of comments on this item before we vote. Dr. Clyde Williams and Arnold Sachs on item 1. No, did he? Who was our doctor?
Thank you, Arnold Sachs. It was mentioned in the master plan. The Midfield Concourse actually entered into this conversation. What is the status of the Midfield Concourse? From what I understand, or what I'm thinking, or well, that's two different things, but this is the Tom Bradley Terminal, and this would be the Midfield Concourse, and this would be the Crossfield, the Midfield runway that you're talking about building, because,
Yeah,
Right there?
right.
so
Okay.
the planes will be going this way. How will they, you mentioned that right now they're using two other runways to get to the Tom Bradley Terminal. So basically, they'll be crossing here to go back to there and using the same two runways. A and B. How is the use of the A380s, is it impacting the use of those runways? Were they developed to withstand the weight of the A380s? Because I'm sure they're heavier than the planes that would normally be using the Tom Bradley Terminal. B, why wasn't the Crossfield, the Midfield, this runway included in the original plans when the Midfield Concourse was brought up, the Tom Bradley renovations were brought up, and the South Runway were brought up? It was almost $3 billion in projects, but there was no mention of a Crossfield taxiway. Why wasn't it mentioned then? And again, what's the status of the Midfield Concourse? There was a bond, I believe, passed by the city for almost $1 billion when the Tom Bradley Terminal the renovations were pronounced in the city council. I believe Councilman Rosendahl said it was most expensive construction to be done. And recently, there was another bond passed by LAWA last summer for another $1 billion. So there's two bonds floating around. There's stuff that's not been included in the master plan that should have been included in the master plan, and there's still no mention of the Midfield Concourse. Where we are with that.
Thank you. And we'll have an update, I'm sure, soon in this committee on the Midfield Concourse. Okay, do we take this, we take it as a whole item to approve
Yes.
both that this,
As recommended by the board, they're asking that the city council...
we have the same findings as the executive director. Okay, so moved? Second?
Sure.
That was a sure? So without objection, we'll approve that as it came to us.
Yes, except for one clarification, the staff want us to, the council to affirm the board certification of the final EIR.
I think that's what we just did.
The actual recommendation says certify, but that's the board's authority. They're asking us to affirm the certification.
Okay, so affirmed.
So affirmed.
Okay.
Okay, thank you.
You think you're great, Roger. Thanks.
Yes, thank you.
Sure. Item 2?
Under item 2, the Board of Airport Commissioners submits for approval the First Amendment to a contract with Dim Jim Aviation Incorporated for program management services for the LAX Development Program. The development program is the modernization of LAX program. And the The amendment would extend the contract term from 1 year to a term of 6 years, increase the contract amount from $25 million for year 1 to $100 million for the entire 6-year term, with appropriations to be made on an annual basis to the contract. And appropriate, the amendment would also appropriate year 2 funding in an amount not to exceed $25 million.
Thank you very much for that. Is anybody here from DimJim?
No, they're not, Councilman.
Is that the crowd out of where?
DimJim? Well, I'm not sure where their headquarters are anymore,
Boulevard, they're an
but they
office.
do have an LA office.
Yeah,
Yes.
okay. So did we do any competitive bidding on this, or are we just going to 100 million with that?
Well, we did, and I'd like to clarify. Last year, when we came to, when we selected DimJim, we went through a very rigorous competitive process. When we entered into a 1-year contract with DimJim after the competitive process, but that 1-year contract, it was always contemplated that if DimJim did a good job, that we would amend the contract. So this is a contract amendment that's based on a rigorous selection process that was done over a year ago to select the program manager. Now, the reason we entered into a 1-year contract was at that time we really did not have a good idea on the definition of what it was we were going to do. As you're aware, a year ago we were actually contemplating building the northern part of the Midfield Satellite Concourse. So over the last year, what DimJim has been helping us do is get to the point where, as you know, we now have an architectural vision for the Newtown Bradley Terminal, the Midfield Satellite, as well as all of the ancillary projects that will be moving forward. And we have a plan now to move forward with an orderly development of the Greenlight projects as we move through the environmental program. DimJim has done, in my opinion, a very good job of helping us define the program. They've helped us schedule it. They've helped us scope it. They've helped us better define it. They're helping us overseeing the architects and engineers that are in the design process. In short, they're being the program managers. So they've done a good job. We now have a better idea of how this program is going to be managed and how it's going to be run. So we are now in the point where we can estimate what we believe we'll need from DimJim over the next 6 years. But one of the things that I've tried to do since I took this program over a year ago is bring more LAWA staff into the program. When we started with DimJim last year, there were only about 4 LAWA staff actually assigned to the project. Right now, we have almost 70 LAWA staff assigned to the project, and we contemplate about 59 DimJim staff. So we continue to grow and utilize LAWA engineers and architects, construction managers, surveyors, and inspectors to bring into this project. So, which is one of the reasons why we're only asking for, we're only going to our board for annual funding on this, because every year we will go back, determine what we need from DimJim for the following year as we move forward.
Very cool. But it's $100 million for 5 years to continue the vision that we have of modernizing.
It's actually to continue to up to $100 million for 5 years to actually put in the ground. At the end of this contract, we will have the Newtown Bradley International Terminal done. We will have a couple of new taxiways completed, pending, again, project level EIR approval. So it will be to actually put in place close to $6 billion worth of construction.
Yeah, one thing, Ms. Hahn, is you were basically asking about the DimJim contract
Right.
and the competitive process they went through and the transparency, and now it's up to $100 million for 5 more extension on it. What I'd like to see happen before the council, before we vote on it as a group, is bring them in and let them explain how they vision the next 5 years, the contract relationship with us. I mean, there's several obvious issues we have. One, when will the people mover actually be? When will the midfield terminal actually get up? When will that spur that sets up the new gates be done? Just the sensing of timetable from them as the master managers, I guess, of the project. I'd like to see them give us a little dog and pony.
I just have a suggestion, Bill, only because I've found sometimes if you, I'm just saying brother to brother, council member to
Yeah.
council, go out and get in a conference room, and if you're not satisfied, because we look to you as
Yeah.
your district, then come back and say, let's have something here. I think it's the incumbent upon the airport department and other departments that need these resources to do that. I just would think it may be taken a different way as opposed to if you had that, and maybe you have had that first,
Yeah,
in a room.
I personally have had a briefing and a first-class briefing, but I was thinking more in keeping with we're spending up to $100 million. It is the first real kick beyond, of course, the South Runway and the, taxiway. Obviously, the Tom Bradley is under construction, just to give people a sense that the modernization is on track more than anything else. I don't mean, Tom, I'm
I
questioning.
understand that. I just think
Just for show and tell for the rest of people.
If I could understand, Councilman, and one of the problems we have here is the DIMJM contract expires in March. And if we don't get to City Council for the amendment, we will actually have to go out with a
I don't think
bogus
that's what he's
procurement.
saying. I don't think
okay.
that's what he's saying.
Okay,
I think
sorry.
he's okay with the,
Yeah.
I
Amendment.
think what he is saying is we're now going to approve a 5-year amendment up to $100 million. You're going to be asking for $25 million a year as we move forward. I think what you're wanting is maybe it's time to have DIMJM.
Absolutely.
Just kind of give us all, what's your vision? How do we get through the next 5 years?
Okay.
How do you see all these things that we've all been dreaming about actually coming to fruition? I think
Right on.
that's what you're thinking. You're not approving this.
No,
Yeah.
Okay. I'm sorry.
I
Right.
think we need to shed light on it,
Okay.
considering all of the issues.
Would you like us to do that here at committee? Is that what you're at, or what format would you?
Preference is the city council,
Okay.
so that the whole city can see it in Channel 35, and people can come down from Westchester and other places that want to either be.
Let me ask
for
the
it or
question.
against it.
Why don't we give a general report, because it's not all, is DIMJM 100% responsible for everything?
No, actually, I am, along with the chief airport engineer.
All
Yeah,
right, good. So you give
You're
the
looking
report,
at
but
us.
have it. I got it. I got it. I
To
wanna
make
make
it
sure.
simpler, an
Okay.
update on where we are.
On the- that's
Why don't we
it.
get that? Why don't we get that?
Enough,
We'll
Nick.
get-
And have
we'll
them there.
agendize that. How about the next,
Yeah.
an update of where we're at?
Thank you.
Yes.
Intisar Dur, I'm Chief Airports Engineer. Like Roger said, if I could make one correction, is that actually it is $100 million contract over a 6-year period, not 5 years.
Oh, because we've had 1 year.
Right.
Correct.
And we're having an additional 5, and the whole thing is going.
100
It's
million.
100
correct.
million.
Are you done asking your questions?
Yeah, I just want to
Okay.
make sure, for the record, when we go through this,
Right.
we know, for instance, in my conversations, most recent, which have happened since the last board meeting and today, the people mover will come in not in the first 5 years, but maybe as the 6th, 7th, 8th, 9th year comes in. Also, that we're hearing the midfield terminal is going to be 2015. Also hearing that the rest of the Bradley gate situation will be mid-year 13, halfway through that year. So I guess my question is, what is your timetables on
Okay.
these projects at this point?
Sure.
That's what I've heard, but it hasn't been on the.
Right.
Okay.
Let me ask, what's the total? We're throwing around the numbers for this particular contract. What do we think all the improvements in Tom Bradley, once it's all said and done, will amount to?
The improvements for the Tom Bradley terminal itself, our estimate right now for the new concourses and what we're calling the core improvements, which would be the improved bag claim, customs border protection area, new concession space, all total. That estimated cost of that is about $840 million. There is probably another $500 to $600 million in other taxiway work. Mr. Sachs mentioned the 2 taxiways, Sierra and Quebec. Those taxiways actually have to be completely taken out and moved to the west, so we have those costs. We have new ramp work. that
So
has to go
total?
in. Total for what we're calling right now the LAX development program, the Tom Bradley terminal, and all of the ancillary work, the Crossfield Taxiway project, and the new central utility plant. The total on all of that right now is right around $3.2 billion. So, and that's work that we have right now going under.
How with that utility plant coming along? I was nervous about
I'm very, that's what's keeping me up at night too, Councilman, and it is coming along. We're moving forward on it. We have permitting challenges and other challenges, but it's something that needs to be done, so.
I don't know if my colleagues got a copy of it, but I was given a copy of a letter sent to our mayor from the International Air Transport Association that was just expressing their concerns of the cost of modernizing LAX and the burden falling on the airlines, and at this time of economic crisis for all industries, and certainly the airline industry is a part of that. Is this the right time for us to, be moving forward full speed ahead with our modernization? Do you want to have a response to that?
I think what I can say, first of all, is that letter which came out of IATA, or the International Air Transport Association, does not reflect the sentiments of most of the international carriers at the Tom Bradley International Terminal. The international carriers at Tom Bradley are intimately involved in every step of the Tom Bradley development program. They actually have hired an independent architect that has an office on my floor. That architect is involved in every design meeting that we do, every decision that we make with respect to the design, to the finishes. They are involved in lockstep. So it's an unfortunate letter that was sent by the International Association. We do not believe, and we have gotten assurances from Frank Clark, who, as you know, heads up Blackstack Corporation, which represents the Tibbet carriers. Frank has come out against that letter, as well as most of the Tibbet carriers, or the Tibbet carriers, the local carriers have come out in support of the project. So it was an unfortunate letter.
Is he going to make that public?
He actually did. Unfortunately, the LA Times reporter chose not to use his quote.
Has he written a letter to the mayor?
I don't know if he has or not. I would ask Mike Molina that. So, Mike,
Yeah.
do you know?
Mike. He's talking to his executive committee about it.
Right. That might be something that would be helpful as we all, as a city, continue to support this modernization plan. It might be, because it's certainly something we all care about. We're all trying to pay attention to the airline industry and our carriers. But again, what I've always heard from them is they didn't mind this kind of a capital improvement program as long as they knew there were benchmarks, there were deadlines, there was actually a plan to modernize LAX. What they always objected to was a sense that, we didn't really have a good plan. We didn't have the whole city on board moving forward with modernizing this airport. But they have been one of the loudest voices, in my opinion, of really modernizing the airport, from the inline baggage system to, certainly a lot of them care very much about customs and about what we're doing to create a more streamlined effort with customs. So, I always think that the port and LAX are two economic engines, and they kind of can be our economic stimulus project here in Los Angeles. We're going to be putting a lot of people to work with these construction jobs. As long as as you said, it's a great time to be building, as long as we're getting good, low-cost bids on everything we're doing. But we're in a project labor agreement on these projects, so it'll be a lot of people going to work modernizing this airport, as well as, I think, ultimately attracting more business to LAX, because we have a first-rate facility.
The timing is not great, but at the same time, we've delayed it for so long, we can't afford to delay it any longer.
Right.
So,
Mr. LaBonge.
Yeah, I just wanted to thank you. And I remember in 1960, they put out only because from historic, not that I actually focused. In 1960, I was, 7
Just a
years
small,
old.
yeah.
But there was a booklet that they put out that talked about all the good things the city's doing. And they had all the different departments. I'll find it from my historic files, but maybe the airport and the port and water and power could put that out, because the people have made a great investment. And they don't understand. I bet you if it went out on Ventura Boulevard, on Gaffey Street, on Sunset Boulevard in the Palisades, and asked people, how is the airport paid for? I bet very few people would say it's paid for by the airline carriers. So I think we've got to, information is knowledge is power. We've got to educate them on the airport, educate them on the ports and the tideland.
Right, this is not
rights,
taxpayer dollars.
and other how it goes forward on this deal, so that they see the piece of pie. Because people don't understand some of these things. Why are you spending that money?
Right.
Why can't you spend it in some other place? So I think we
Right.
got to inform the public.
Right.
And then just a thought when I was looking over at Mr. Rosendahl and remember the days there at Z Channel. Were you ever at Z Channel?
I came in as they were moving on.
Moving on. So and then it was Century then right away.
Well, first was Westinghouse Broadcasting and Cable, then Century.
And when Z? But when did it go from Z to?
It went from teleprompter to Century, teleprompter to Westinghouse Broadcasting and Cable in 1981.
81.
And then in '86, it went from Westinghouse to Century, and then.
You arrived in 86?
Became Adelphia.
Yeah, your friends. You arrived in 86?
I arrived in 81.
81, so that's when I first saw you and your
That's right.
information. I thought maybe the airport could have a quarterly show on Channel 35.
Yeah, I
Just
think-
be
I think
committed
it's a
to it.
Great idea. To
You know,
keep
just
people
say, give it, update from the airport, you know, and see what's going on. And you
Bill
tell
could
it-
host it.
Yeah, in
Well,
fact, I hosted
yeah.
one last night on Measure B.
Yes, I heard it all over the radio this
Oh,
morning.
is that right?
All over NPR.
Yeah. So I think we got to tell the people because they don't know. And also the
Yes.
importance, the most important thing too, is airlines are diverse and their aircraft is diverse. You know, 2/3 may be passenger, 1/3. The flowers you buy downtown LA
You were
may
good
come
at
in
it.
from Ecuador
You
on
were
a
good.
plane
Right.
at LAX last night. And so all that is changing. We got to tell the people that.
Okay, thank you very much.
Just a quick question before you run,
Yes,
a
sir.
couple of them, real quick. I want to know when we're going to make it free for people to use Wi-Fi at the airport. I've been asking that question
Yes.
for 3 years, and I think it's time that a
Yes.
person coming to the airport can get onto their computer and not have to pay an extra charge for that. I'd like to make that a benefit and make it happen. That's story one. Story two, I want to know the exact ribbon-cutting date for the 3 holes of the Westchester Golf Course. I know we're getting close, it's supposed to be March, April, or something like that. I want to know, my community keeps asking me. 3, the other issue is the Otis College and that piece of land there. How are we going forward? What do we need to do to expedite Otis having its full campus? And saying that, I want you to say on the record that the timetables have changed for our green projects. So would you tell me when you think the People Mover will be complete?
I don't have that date right
Yeah,
now,
no,
but I
we'll
will
come
come
back.
back.
Okay,
I
you'll
will
bring
come
back
Yeah.
that. You'll do the same thing with the midfield terminal and
Right.
all the other aspects, so people can
Okay.
get a sense of how it's moving around a little bit based on the reality of here and now.
Don't people get a better score when there's only 15 holes?
That's very good. Thank you so much.
Very good. Say that
I'm just asking.
I almost heard that.
You know. Do you have to really disclose that you only golfed on 15 holes when you turn in your scorecards? Okay.
Is it an 18-hole or 9-hole out there?
It's a 15 hole.
15. It's a-
It will be 18.
Those
yes.
three you're going to
I
see
thought the
more
goal was to get a lower score in golf. Okay, Arnold Sachs on item 2. I'm just asking.
Good morning again, Arnold Sachs. I just
Morning.
wanted to point out that although this contract is going to increase from 6 years, the first year was already paid for $25 million. So it's actually a 5-year increase for $75 million. In Yiddish, there's a word called kismet for luck. How lucky Gina Marie happened to reopen the negotiations that allowed Dim Jim to get this contract. This was a big thing about how you forgot that beyond me. In the West, it's actually called bull something. I'd also like to point out $100 million for this contract is almost half the cost of what it would cost to bring the Green Line into the airlines.
You're going to get it in, baby,
Yeah, sometime, sure.
in our lifetime.
Yeah, when you become a clone. $75 million increase for this contract over 5 years. We heard that the LAWA employees are increasing, the engineers, while the Dim Jim employees are decreasing. So basically, the pay is actually the same. It's $15 million. It comes out to $15 million a year, except for year 2 when it's going to be almost $25 million again. How much in all these particulates that you mentioned in number 1 would be reduced if the Green Line actually went to the airport and people making trips by vehicle eliminated some of those trips, eliminated some of the trips done by the shuttles, eliminated all that stuff by focusing the money on a transportation issue instead of a management issue? We heard in the discussion a 5-year plan. There was going to be the improvements on Tom Bradley, the Crossfield runway, but no mention of the midfield
Let me
concourse.
just comment on Green Line. Roger Snowball, Gina Marie, and I met And the Green Line is part of the first 5 years of Measure R's money. And because of that reality, they will start on it forthwith. And then as the People Mover gets itself to that location, it will then connect to the People Mover. We are on track for the first time since 1994 on the Green Line.
Okay, let's make sure we are clear on what we are approving, colleagues. We are approving the first amendment to the contract with Dim Jim to extend the term for 1 year to 6 years.
From 1 year to 6 years.
Okay, and increase the current appropriation of $25 million by another $25 million for year 2. Is that correct?
Yes, and the amendment also authorizes up to $100 million for the full 6-year term.
Right.
But it also appropriates just the year 2 funding of $25 million.
Okay, and any increase in the whole total contract amount will require we'll have to come back to the city council.
Yes, if they go above the 100.
Oh, hello there. You look perplexed.
Clarification, Bill Koenig, CAO's office. The amendment in front of you, it will be increasing this contract amount up to $100 million.
Right.
For the maximum. Currently, 25 has already been allocated. They are requesting $25 million to be allocated for the second year of the
Isn't that what I
project,
just said?
and the remaining 50 for the remaining to be spread out over the remainder of the years of the contract.
So they're using up $50 million in year 2.
A total of 50 would be used
For ye-
by the end of year 2.
Right.
Right.
That's what I
And then
said.
the remaining 50 would be allocated over the remaining years of the extended period.
So if we're in year 2 and it's going to 6 years, that's 4. They're going to spend $50 million over 4 years.
Right. Approximately. It would
So they spent
undoubtedly
50
vary.
in 2, and they're saying they'd spend 50 in 4.
Right.
Just trying to get it clear.
Right. If I could clarify that, we have actually invoiced to date spent about $13 million. We do have the majority of the initial $25 million has been allocated for projects, but we are not on a burn rate of $25 million per year. So we believe
Well,
right
you
now.
can't be.
No, we're not.
It
So
would go over
right.
the $100 million.
Right. So what we're asking for, again, is a contract amendment that will take it up to 6 years with a not-to-exceed upper limit of the total
Right.
contract.
And you're also
of
asking
100.
for a $25 million addition to your already $25 million for
Right.
year 2.
And that was an action, when we took this to the board, we asked the board to only appropriate $25 million in funding. So we asked for a total contract authority of $100 million, but we only asked for an additional $25
I know.
million.
Haven't I just said all this?
Yeah.
Exactly
Yes,
that way.
Exactly that way.
Okay, well, I don't know why,
I think for the record. they want
I
to
know,
be
but I
sure.
think I've said it exactly the way you guys just said it.
Yeah, and Madam Chair, you were very clear.
Thank
Just want
you.
to know if the City Attorney's Office, Kelly Martin, has any issues with how this process went through, considering where we were a year ago and, giving us your stamp of process transparency.
Hi, Kelly Martin, City Attorney's Office. No, we were really clear when we did the procurement a year ago that this was the process we would expect to go through. The RFP, in fact, said that we expected to do a 1-year contract and then come back to the City Council for more time and more money. So we spelt it out really very much at the beginning of the process.
Right. So, yeah, so if you spend your next $50 million in, 3 years,
We'll have to come
you
back.
have to come back.
Correct.
Yes.
Right. Okay. Everybody understand it? Okay. There's a motion to approve,
So moved.
and seconded. Without objection, we'll approve that item. Okay, let's go to 3. It's 5 till 10.
Under item 3, the Board of Airport
Okay.
Commissioners submits for approval a proposed change order to the contract with Clark McCarthy, a joint venture, for construction of the interior improvements and baggage screening facilities at the Tom Bradley Terminal at LAX. The change order would provide for construction of design enhancements to public spaces on the arrivals level, mezzanine level, and departures level in the terminal, would provide for changes to the south baggage screening system to integrate that system with American Airlines Terminal 4 inline system, and would add $27.9 million to the contract funding and project construction budget. XCAO also has submitted a report.
You want to just ask
Yeah,
your
just
questions?
Two quick questions.
Sure, certainly.
Will the additional funds only be used for the proposed Bradley design improvements in connection to Terminal 4, or have there been cost overruns on the original project?
They will only be used for additional work. They have not been cost overruns on the additional
Second
project.
question, will these improvements remain in place once the Tom Bradley improvement project is complete, or are they temporary measures?
They're permanent. They will remain in place, with the exception of some, I guess I'd call finishes, wallpaper and paint on the arrivals tunnel. But other than that, the 99 and 9/10% will remain
And
in
your
place.
timetable, are we on target?
We will be done March of next year.
Yes.
March of
We are-
2010.
Looking at how much money?
I'm sorry?
How much money?
Have we spent today?
And will spend between now and
We will be spending the total contract amount, which was $500 million plus $40 million in change orders, so about $550 million. We are 75% complete with the project, funding as well as work in place. And we are on target to close out the contract by March of 2010.
Okay, my last question is about the signage and the advertising. Do we have a handle on how many signs are out there and what our cash flow is? I see a lot of different.
Yes, sir, we do.
Stuff.
Yes, we do. Actually, the advertising program's been working very, very well.
Having got to this last item, some might wonder why this is a change order and not an amendment to the
Okay.
contract.
The reason it's a change order is because what we're asking for is work that was never contemplated in the initial contract. This is not a change of conditions, it's actually additional work. And this is work that was actually value engineered out of the original modernization program. But because of the amount of money that we're spending there and what's going on, we wanted to make sure that when we were done with the Bradley improvements, that when people walked into the terminal, they actually saw an improvement to
Right.
the terminal.
Right.
So that's why we're doing it. The other problem is trying to go out and hire someone else to do it, working in the same confined space as Clark McCarthy is currently working, was not practical.
So it makes sense just to make
yes.
this change. Now, I know, obviously, when we project a project as large as this, we account for change orders.
Yes.
Are we within our?
We
what
are well within
projected?
our budget, yes.
Yes, we had an original change order contingency amount of 10% or around 10% of the construction contract, and we are well within that, and we are projected to be well within that amount at the completion.
So, as you said to me, when people walk in, it's going to be a wow factor.
Right. In fact, we're calling this the Bradley Wow Project, so that's what we're hoping we're
Small
going to get.
W.
It's a small W right now.
Yeah, forget
but yes.
that W. You know,
Right.
there's a gang of W.
Oh, okay.
Hey, have you been to Terminal 5 in Heathrow?
Yes, not since they opened it. I was there before it opened.
Yeah,
so.
but there's a lot of light in that.
Yes,
I
there
want a
is.
lot of light in this. A lot of sunlight.
There will be, in the new international terminal, there will be a lot of light.
Bring a lot of
Yes,
light.
the model that we unveiled showed a tremendous amount of
There will
light.
be a lot of light.
Let there be light.
Let there be light. Yes, anything else you want to say?
No.
No. Okay, motion to approve, sorry, Arnold Sachs, yes. You gotta wait.
Thank you, Arnold Sachs. I did touch on the bonds that were issued regarding the construction here. I also meant to report, you're having a report from Dim Jim on update on their strategy. Nobody mentioned the revenues, although you did touch momentarily on the revenue stream. Could we get a report on the revenue stream projections from the airport regarding how they see revenues to pay for these infrastructure updates, upgrades, and the new construction? And that's it. Tom Bradley Terminal?
Thank you, sir.
$3.2 million, $3.2 billion in total, which is what the total was for the three projects when they were first brought before City Council. I do have a quick question. Yesterday, I know.
We want to get his vote, you know what I mean?
Okay, quick question. Yesterday, there was a low bid for cleaning up after the fire. today, there's another low bid for the construction on the Bradley Terminal. How come so low?
Thank you very much. Anybody else in the audience wishing to address this committee? Seeing none, and having this moved and seconded, without objection, we will approve this item. This meeting is now adjourned. Yeah, 89.3.